My first day at a new office started before I even entered the building. I woke up almost an hour earlier than necessary because I was too nervous to sleep. I had prepared my clothes the night before, packed my bag, checked the office address 3 times, and even planned which train I would take. Still, while eating breakfast, I kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. I worried that I might arrive late, forget someone's name, sit in the wrong place, or fail to understand something important. I had changed jobs because I wanted a new challenge and better opportunities, but that morning I started wondering why I had ever left my comfortable old position. At my previous company, I knew everyone, understood the systems, and knew exactly what I needed to do. Now, I was starting again from zero. I left home much earlier than usual because I wanted enough time in case something went wrong. As a result, I arrived almost 40 minutes before I was supposed to start. The office was on the 9th floor of a modern building in the business district. I stood outside for a few minutes, pretending to check my phone because I did not want to enter too early. People in business clothes walked past me carrying coffee and talking about their mornings. I wondered whether some of them worked for my new company. Every person suddenly seemed like someone I might need to meet. Eventually, I decided that waiting outside was making me feel more nervous, so I entered the building and went upstairs. A receptionist greeted me and asked for my name. After checking a list, she explained that someone from Human Resources would meet me shortly. I sat in a small waiting area and looked around the office through a glass wall. People were already working at their desks. Some were talking in small groups, while others were looking at computer screens. Everything seemed calm and normal, which somehow made me even more aware that I was the new person. A few minutes later, a woman from Human Resources arrived and welcomed me. She explained the basic schedule for my first day and showed me around the office. We visited the kitchen, meeting rooms, restrooms, printer area, and several different departments. I tried to remember everything, but after 5 minutes, all the hallways looked the same. Then came the part I had been thinking about all morning. I needed to meet new people. The Human Resources manager introduced me to several coworkers, one after another. I smiled, introduced myself, and tried to remember each name. There was Daniel from design, Olivia from sales, Mark from finance, Hannah from customer support, and several others whose names disappeared from my memory almost immediately. Everyone seemed friendly, but meeting so many people at once was difficult. I kept worrying that someone would speak to me later, and I would have no idea what their name was. After the 5th introduction, I stopped trying to remember everyone perfectly and focused instead on which department they worked in. Eventually, my new manager came to meet me. We had spoken several times during the interview process, so seeing a familiar face made me feel calmer. He introduced me to the rest of my team and explained that they had prepared a workspace for me. I followed him across the office and finally found my desk near a large window. A laptop, keyboard, notebook, and welcome card were waiting there. Seeing my name written on the card made the situation feel real. This was no longer an interview or a plan for the future. I actually worked there now. The co-worker sitting beside me was named Ryan. He had been with the company for about 2 years, and my manager had asked him to help me during my first week. Ryan showed me how to log into the computer, connect to the company systems, and find the shared folders I would need. He also explained which communication tools the team used and where I could find information about current projects. I tried to follow every step carefully, but there was much more information than I expected. Every system had a different password, every folder seemed to contain another folder, and people used short project names that meant nothing to me yet. I wrote everything down because I knew there was no chance I would remember it all. Around 10 o'clock, I joined my first team meeting. There were 8 people sitting around a table discussing projects that had already been running for several months. I understood the general ideas, but many details were completely new. People mentioned clients I had never heard of, deadlines I did not know about, and documents I had never seen. At first, I felt uncomfortable because everyone else seemed to understand everything immediately. I wondered whether they expected me to understand it too. Then I reminded myself that this was my first day. My job was not to know everything. My job was to listen, ask useful questions, and slowly learn the job. That thought helped me relax. Instead of pretending to understand every detail, I took notes about things I wanted to ask later. When someone mentioned a project several times, I wrote down its name. When I heard an unfamiliar expression, I added it to a small list. By the end of the meeting, I still had many questions, but I also had a basic picture of what the team was working on. Ryan later spent about 20 minutes explaining the most important projects to me. Once I had more context, the meeting suddenly made much more sense. Lunch was another situation I had worried about. At my old job, I always ate with the same group of coworkers. At the new office, I did not know whether people ate together, brought food from home, or went outside. Around noon, Ryan asked if I wanted to join several team members at a nearby restaurant. I agreed immediately because I thought it would be a good chance to meet new people without talking only about work. There were 5 of us at lunch, and the conversation was much more relaxed than the morning meetings. They asked about my previous job, where I lived, and what I liked to do on weekends. I learned that 2 co-workers enjoyed hiking, another was learning to cook, and Ryan had recently adopted a dog. By the time we returned to the office, they felt less like strangers. The afternoon was focused on learning the job. My manager gave me a simple task connected to one of the team's smaller projects. He explained that there was no pressure to finish quickly because the main purpose was to help me understand their process. I was grateful for that because even a simple task felt complicated when everything around it was unfamiliar. I needed to find information in the shared system, use a template I had never seen before, and send the finished document through the correct process. I asked Ryan several questions and apologized once for asking so much. He explained that asking questions during the first week was much better than making avoidable mistakes later. That simple idea made me feel much more comfortable. About halfway through the task, I made my first mistake. I saved a document in the wrong folder and then could not find it. For several minutes, I searched through the system while becoming increasingly nervous. I imagined having to tell my manager that I had lost my first piece of work after only a few hours at the company. Eventually, Ryan helped me locate the file. It had not disappeared at all. I had simply saved it under a different project. The problem took less than a minute to fix. I realized that I had turned a tiny mistake into a major problem inside my head because I wanted so badly to make a good first impression. That became one of the most useful lessons of the day. I did not need to prove myself immediately. Nobody expected a new employee to understand every system, remember every name, and complete every task perfectly on the first day. Most people were simply trying to help me become comfortable enough to learn. Once I understood that, I stopped watching myself so carefully and started paying more attention to the work. Later in the afternoon, my manager sat with me to explain what my first month would look like. During the first week, I would mostly observe, learn the company's systems, and support small tasks. During the second and third weeks, I would begin taking responsibility for parts of projects. By the end of the month, the goal was for me to manage several regular tasks independently. Hearing this plan made me feel better because I could finally see that learning the job was supposed to happen slowly. I had been treating the first day like an exam when it was actually only the beginning of a much longer process. Around 4 o'clock, I went to make coffee and accidentally walked into the wrong section of the office on my way back. For a few seconds, I could not find my desk. I laughed quietly because only a few hours earlier I had worried about exactly that happening. A co-worker from the design team noticed my confusion and showed me the correct direction. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I found the situation funny. The office was beginning to feel less frightening because I had already survived several small mistakes. By 5:30, most people started preparing to leave. I finished the small task my manager had given me and sent it for review. I was tired even though I had not done much difficult work. The tiredness came from paying attention all day. I had learned dozens of names, systems, rules, project details, and new routines. My brain felt full. Before shutting down my laptop, I looked through the notes I had taken since morning. There were almost 6 pages. At the top of the first page, I had written a simple reminder to myself that I only needed to learn one thing at a time. Reading it again made me smile. On the train home, I thought about how different I felt compared with that morning. When I arrived, I had been afraid of almost everything. I worried about how to introduce myself, how to find my desk, how to meet new people, and whether I would be able to learn the job. By the end of the day, none of those problems had disappeared completely, but they no longer seemed so large. I knew where my desk was. I remembered several names. I understood the basic systems. I had completed my first task. Most importantly, I had discovered that the people around me did not expect perfection. The next morning, I still felt nervous, but the feeling was much smaller. This time, I entered the building without waiting outside. I greeted the receptionist, went directly to the 9th floor, and found my desk without getting lost. Ryan was already working when I arrived, and I recognized several coworkers walking past me. The office that had seemed completely unfamiliar 24 hours earlier was already beginning to feel more normal. Over the next few weeks, I slowly became part of the team. I learned everyone's names, understood the projects, and stopped needing help with basic systems. Eventually, new employees joined after me, and I became one of the people introducing them to the office. Whenever I saw how nervous they looked on their first morning, I remembered exactly how I had felt. I tried to make their first day easier by explaining that nobody expected them to know everything immediately. My first day at a new office taught me something I still remember whenever I enter an unfamiliar situation. Feeling nervous does not always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it simply means everything is new. Meeting new people becomes easier after the first few conversations. Finding your desk becomes automatic after a few days. Learning the job happens one task at a time. The things that feel confusing today can become completely normal much faster than we expect. I had walked into that office believing I needed to make a perfect first impression. I left understanding that I only needed to be curious, respectful, and willing to learn. That simple change in thinking made everything easier. A first day is not a test of how much you already know. It is simply the first step toward learning what comes next.